In the beginning, God created beast and man so that both might live in friendship. Evil men betrayed God's trust and waged bloody wars, not only against their own kind, but against the apes. Our Savior led a remnant of those who survived in search of greener pastures, where ape and human might forever live in friendship.
Hello everyone, I'm Tom Elliot and this is Lawgiver, a Planet of the Apes podcast. Now, I said in my introductory episode that I wouldn't be tackling Planet of the Apes movies, TV shows, books and comics in any kind of chronological order, but I did have a plan to tackle some of those Planet of the Apes first. So that would mean covering Pierre Boulle's novel first, covering the first Gold Key Planet of the Apes comic first, and then maybe the first novelization and so on. But then after that, the playing field would be open. But the best laid plans of apes and men often go awry, and sometimes you have to react to what's going on at the time. Now, last year Marvel Comics, under their 20th Century Studios imprint, began publishing a new Planet of the Apes comic series. And this is after their original run of comics in the 1970s that has a rich history all of its own, which we will get into. And then the property went around a number of different comics companies, most notably Boom Studios. So the series that Marvel produced last year was a 5-issue run which was set in the most recent iteration of the Apes universe. The universe that includes Dawn, Rise and War of the Planet of the Apes. And that 5-issue run has been released in a paperback edition under the name Planet of the Apes: Fall of Man. Now, I am a big fan of that trilogy and I'm hoping for good things with Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, but when it comes to comics, I do tend to prefer comics set in the timeline of the original movies, because in the New Apes trilogy, the apes haven't developed the use of clothing or their own identity. I find on the page that the original series apes are just much more visually interesting. Now, that might change with Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes because the apes do appear to be starting to develop in those ways, but we'll see when we get there. So I was pleased to hear that the new Marvel series this year was going to be set in the timeline of the original movies, and this series is called Beware the Planet of the Apes. First published on January 3rd, 2024, written by Mark Guggenheim with artwork by Alvaro Lopez. And the Marvel Comics pre-release describes it like this: in a hostile world run by aggressive guerrillas, scientists Cornelius and Zira are the only apes alive who see value in the mute, dumb human race. But even they know human capabilities have severe limits. So when their nephew Lucius goes missing, it is with great trepidation that they turn to a human ally, a young woman who will someday earn the moniker Nova. Steeped in a love for the classic tales, Mark Guggenheim and Alvaro Lopez series will take the Planet of the Apes legacy to explosive new heights, and it all starts here. When I first heard that pitch, it did set one alarm bell ringing. I don't mind prequels, I don't mind sidequels, I don't mind gaps in timelines being filled by novels or comics. I actually really enjoy that. But when someone starts to mess with what we already know about certain characters in the established first film, then that starts to become tricky territory. Now you'll find out when Lawgiver gets going that I'm not super precious about things in franchises that I love. I find that being too sensitive and gatekeepery, if you like, inevitably sucks the fun out of the whole thing. And with Planet of the Apes in particular, they were made at a time when rock-solid continuity wasn't paid as much attention to as it is now. There are several inconsistencies in those films. They weren't thinking, let's make a series of movies where the continuity is rock solid. It was like, okay, that movie was a hit, let's make another. That movie was a hit, let's make another. And there are continuity issues all over, but we don't really care, we just love them for what they are. So as long as a good effort is made with new media to fit in as best it can, I don't mind the occasional clash here and there. So we've established that this comic is set before the first Planet of the Apes movie, but Cornelius and Zira meet Nova. So that's the thing that I was unsure about. So this comic book will probably live or die on how it can sell that part of the story to me. So let's get into the book, and I have to warn you, there will be spoilers in my review here. So let's begin with the things that I like. I was surprised and really quite pleased when I opened the book and I saw that the first page is a depiction of the Icarus crashing into the water on the planet. And the artwork, the sharpness of the ship and the way it was shaded was very reminiscent of the original Marvel Planet of the Apes comics from the 1970s. And then over the page, we see our first glimpse of Taylor. And this isn't a depiction of Charlton Heston's Taylor. This is the 1970s Marvel comic book Taylor, who you'll remember wasn't drawn to resemble Charlton Heston, but had a look all of its own. He was more muscular and square-jawed in the comic book style of the time, with a head of thick curly hair and eventually a beard. And then I realized that the reason that this was all reminiscent of the 1970s comic is because these panels are actually taken from the 1970s comic. So the cover of the book might proclaim an all-new prequel to the original film, but it's actually a prequel to the original comics, which are a little bit different and have stories that expand far beyond the scope of the original 5 movies. And then when we get to the credits page, we see that Doug Mensch, the writer of many of those original issues, and George Tusker, the artist, and the rest of the art team get credited too. So I thought that was a nice touch, not to separate itself away from those original Marvel issues and to set itself on yet another timeline. It seems to be happy to be in their timeline. So these panels from the original comics are used as a kind of framing for when this issue takes place. They are put there to show that these things haven't happened yet. We are firmly in the time before Taylor and the crew crash on the planet, but it seems to be suggesting that those events aren't too far into the future. Now the next thing that I like is the artwork. I mentioned that Taylor is in the opening scenes, but he is only depicted by the George Tusker artwork. He's not in the comic book after that because he hasn't arrived yet. So the main characters that we see, drawn by Alvaro Lopez, are Cornelius, Zira, Dr. Zaius, and Nova, and I guess Lucius as well, Zira's nephew. And the likenesses are good, and I really think he captures the overall aesthetic of the original movie period very well. And to complement that, I feel that Mark Guggenheim's dialogue is authentic to those characters too. You can hear the voices of Kim Hunter, Roddy McDowall, and Maurice Evans in your head as you read the book. So it's so far so good, but I think here is where some of my issues start to creep in. So major spoilers ahead from this point. I'll try and keep it as brief as possible, but the main story concerns Nova being separated from her pack when an ape hunting party attacks them. Lucius, Zira's nephew, helps her to escape, but after that, he goes missing. Now Zira wants to go looking for him in the Forbidden Zone, but Dr. Zaius forbids it, but she and Cornelius go anyway. Now my first minor issue is that a couple of times during the story, there's a use of flash forwards that were a little confusing. When Lucius meets Nova, he tells her his name, and he sounds it out like Lucius. And in the next panel, we see Taylor doing the same thing when he christens Nova with her name, Nova. But that hasn't actually happened yet. So when you're getting into the book for the first time and trying to find your footing and you're unsure where all of this sits, you're asking yourself, wait, I think this was a prequel, but is it actually sitting somewhere in the timeline when Nova has already met Taylor? It's just a little confusing, and I don't think we need these flash forwards. If you're familiar with the first Apes movie, which I think most people who buy this book will be, you know that this is Nova that we're talking about. So it's a slight complaint, but not a deal breaker by any means. Perhaps a bit of a bigger complaint though is that the story seems to want to preempt some moments from the first Planet of the Apes movies by having a couple of landmark things happen here first. So cast your mind back to Beneath the Planet of the Apes, at the beginning, when Taylor and Nova are seeing all of the apparitions created by the mutants. Taylor disappears into thin air, and Nova moves her mouth as if she wants to cry out, to scream Taylor's name. But she just can't find the words to do it. She's never spoken before. And it's only later on when she sees Taylor and Brent fighting that she managed to scream out.
Mr. Taylor, Mr. Brent, we're a peaceful people. We don't kill our enemies. We get our enemies to kill each other.
I'm fighting, boy.
And even then, it's not a properly formed word. She can't say the L sound in Taylor. It's her best effort at recreating the sound of speech, but it's as if she's ripped it from the bottom of her soul. But in this first issue of Beware the Planet of the Apes, when Cornelius speaks to Nova and says he's looking for Lucius, Nova quite casually says, Lush. So again, she can't say the name properly, but it seems to me that the point of the movies was that Nova becomes that little bit more civilized after spending time with Taylor and then Brent in the second movie. She was exposed to these two humans talking, and then it takes the trauma of those two men fighting for her to growl this half-formed word of Taylor. So like I said, it's actually using quite casually what was a landmark moment from the first couple of films. And it not only contradicts the intent of the movies, but it's saying that this thing happened here first. And there is another very big instance of that in what happens next. After Dr. Zaius refuses to let Cornelius and Zira go into the Forbidden Zone to look for Lucius, they go anyway, and they end up in some kind of underground tunnel of the New York sanitation system where they encounter Nova again, and then ultimately the three of them head further into the Forbidden Zone where they come across Yankee Stadium. And it seems to be setting this up as the finale to the issue. It's a bit of a Statue of Liberty moment, for them at least, because we obviously know where they are and what happens next. But again, this makes you wonder, why all of the discoveries of the first movie was such a revelation to Cornelius and Zira when they had already encountered this. Now, by the time the first movie comes around, Cornelius has already been to the Forbidden Zone.
We're here. You were captured here.
You fell into the water here? You came ashore, marched across the desert, mountains, many days and nights, and reached the jungle.
Out of the question.
Cornelius, why do you insist on provoking him?
No creature can survive in the Forbidden Zone. I know, I've been there, I've seen it.
But during that conversation, Zira goes on to say,
Cornelius has developed the most brilliant hypothesis.
But I'm probably wrong.
That the ape evolved from a lower order primate, possibly man. In his trip to the Forbidden Zone, he discovered traces of a culture older than recorded time.
The evidence was very meager.
You didn't think so then?
well, Yankee Stadium isn't exactly a trace of another culture, and it's not meager either. So again, this kind of comes across as a massive contradiction to what happens in the next movie. So I think I'm going to reserve judgment on Beware the Planet of the Apes until we get a bit more into the story. Perhaps this makes more sense when the bigger picture is known. And like I said, there are things in it that I enjoyed very much. But I would be interested to hear whether these things are problems for other Planet of the Apes fans. Like I said earlier, I'm not one of those over-picky gatekeeper type fans. It's just not much fun being that way. And you'll hear that as we move through Lawgiver. But these things just really stood out to me. But here's the thing with Planet of the Apes comics. In their entirety, they probably contradict a ton of things in the movies and a ton of things in other Planet of the Apes comic series. There hasn't been that effort over the years to present one cohesive canon. And in a way I do kind of like that. You can pick and choose with the comic books what you want to include in your own canon. And if something doesn't work for you, you can disregard it and move on to the next thing. So I guess by the end of its run, we will see whether Beware the Planet of the Apes is something that we will take into our own personal canons or not. So I'm willing to give it the chance and see what the rest of the series holds. So I hope you'll join me next time when I look at issue number 2 of Beware the Planet of the Apes here on Lawgiver.
We still wait, my children. But as I look at apes and humans, living in friendship, harmony, and at peace, now some 600 years after Caesar's death, at least we wait with hope for the future.